Sumerian tablets are probably one of the oldest form of written record that we have. They've been translated, and they tell exciting stories about how gods intermingled with human beings and actually had a hand in the creation of human beings.
Buried in museum basements are tens of thousands of clay tablets, untouched for millennia, because no one had the tools to fully decode their secrets. Now, a specially trained AI can translate these complex ancient texts all at once, revealing medical knowledge, astronomical calculations, and creation stories that challenge everything we thought we knew about early human civilization.
What we're looking at here is a Sumerian tablet that actually shows the tree of life, flanked by divine beings. You can see here the Anunnaki on each side.
What if the origins of science, law, and storytelling stretch back thousands of years earlier than assumed, embedded in a language once thought nearly impossible to crack? This new breakthrough doesn't just add details to our history books, it forces us to rewrite the very first chapters of human knowledge. The Sumerian Tablets Challenge. Hidden away in museum storage rooms around the world are hundreds of thousands of clay tablets inscribed with cuneiform writing, texts that have been largely unread for over 4,000 years. These tablets contain a vast archive of human history, from laws and religious hymns to medical recipes and astronomical observations. Yet, despite their abundance, the majority of these texts remain untranslated, sitting undeciphered because the skill required to read ancient Sumerian is incredibly specialized and scarce. For over a century and a half since cuneiform was first deciphered in the 1850s, a small community of scholars has worked painstakingly to unlock these tablets' secrets. But the mountain of untranslated work has always grown faster than the scholars could climb it. With only a few hundred experts around the world fluent enough in the language, trying to translate hundreds of thousands of tablets is an overwhelming task, almost hopeless by traditional means. What makes the challenge even greater is that many tablets are physically damaged. Broken edges, missing sections, and faded impressions limit readability. Others are written in abbreviated shorthand or filled with specialized terminology from ancient professions long extinct, creating puzzles even veteran linguists struggle to solve. These physical barriers add complexity to an already formidable linguistic problem. Adding to the difficulty is the diversity of dialects and changes in writing across the 3 millennia when cuneiform was in use. A tablet from 2800 BCE looks drastically different from one written in 600 BCE, even though they use the same script. Each tablet requires scholars to first identify its period, region, and context before accurately interpreting its content. Because of these factors, many important tablets, potentially carrying revolutionary knowledge, have languished in storage, overlooked and untouched for decades or more. The sheer backlog means that the historical narrative we have from Sumerian sources is necessarily incomplete, biased toward what was easier to read rather than what might be most significant. This backlog not only limits our understanding, but risks missing entire chapters of human history, encoded on clay but inaccessible due to human limitations. The slow, deliberate process of traditional translation is a bottleneck that has held back major advances in history, science, and culture. For those who spend their lives trying to decode these texts, the frustration is profound. The gap between the amount of material unearthed and the amount understood grows wider every year, and the urgency to close that gap increases with it. Critical knowledge remains locked away, waiting for a key that seemed impossible to forge. What was needed was not more scholars, there simply weren't enough to match the scope, but a tool that could operate at a scale and speed impossible for humans alone. And as it turns out, that tool has just arrived. While the challenges to translating these tablets are enormous, the mysteries of the civilization behind them deserve deeper examination. Ancient Sumerian civilization unveiled. The Sumerians emerged around 5,000 years ago in the fertile plains between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, in what is now southern Iraq. Historians have long credited this civilization with numerous firsts: the creation of cities, codified laws, organized religion, and perhaps the most transformative invention of all, writing. These achievements laid the foundation for the complex societies that followed, and fundamentally shaped human history. Sumerians invented cuneiform, a writing system named for its wedge-shaped marks pressed into soft clay. They pioneered technologies like the wheel and the plow, and established the first schools, libraries, and legal codes. Their recorded texts range from administrative documents to poetry, including the famed Epic of Gilgamesh, a story containing a flood narrative predating biblical accounts by at least 1,000 years. This civilization's contributions reach far beyond mere record-keeping. Their advanced knowledge in mathematics, law, and medicine influenced the ancient world for centuries and still resonate in modern disciplines. Their legacy made the region a cradle of civilization and a vital puzzle piece in understanding early human development. But still, a lot of what we know about Sumer comes from just a slice of their writings, mainly those tablets that happened to be translatable with the skills and technology we had. A bunch of other tablets stayed in the background, as if they were waiting to add more nuance or even adjust, rewrite parts of this whole story. Researchers, for a long time, had the feeling there had to be a lot more hiding inside these archives, but they simply did not have the tools to open it up. And the Sumerian legacy is important not just as history. It also gives real perspective into the roots of law, the machinery of governance, and cultural expression, kind of shaping how communities end up defining justice, knowledge, and who holds influence. If we could understand their complete arc, it might even bend, way, how we see where civilization begins. Still, the picture of the Sumerians that got painted over the last century has been incomplete, partly because it had to be. It's been tightly steered by the fact that our records are fragmentary. When you recognize those missing pieces, you end up admitting a nearly 4,000-year-old civilization whose full voice still has not been properly heard. Figuring out how far Sumerian achievements really go depends on expanding beyond those silenced texts, which suggests discoveries that could challenge, maybe unsettle, the steady narratives about human progress. To start doing that, we need to appreciate how intricate the language they used, cuneiform, actually is. As the story of the Sumerians unfolds further, so too does the challenge presented by their intricate script. The complexity of cuneiform script. Cuneiform is among the earliest known writing systems, yet unlike modern alphabets, it is far from straightforward. It does not map language in a single consistent way. Instead, it combines logographic signs, where one symbol can represent an entire word or concept, with syllabic signs that represent spoken sounds which combine to form words. This layered system turns translation into a complex puzzle, where meaning depends not only on individual symbols, but also on how they interact within context. A single cuneiform sign can change meaning depending on its surroundings, the time period in which it was written, and the regional scribal tradition of the author. A sign used in an administrative record may carry a different nuance in a mythological hymn or legal text. Because of this flexibility, translators must interpret intent and usage rather than rely on fixed one-to-one equivalents, making precision extremely difficult. The challenge is further complicated by the history of the language itself. Sumerian was a spoken language for roughly 1,000 years before gradually becoming a purely written and scholarly medium. After it ceased to be spoken natively, it survived through scribal education and copying traditions. Later scribes often reproduced older material without fully understanding every expression, preserving archaic phrases whose meanings had shifted or been lost over time. This dead language status creates a deep historical gap between original authors and modern interpreters. Physical preservation adds another obstacle. Many tablets survive only in fragments, with broken edges, eroded surfaces, or missing sections that remove crucial information. Some texts exist only in partial copies, forcing scholars to reconstruct meaning from incomplete evidence. Others use technical vocabulary or shorthand from fields such as administration, medicine, or astronomy, none of which have direct modern equivalents, further complicating interpretation. Over its roughly 3,000-year history, cuneiform also evolved significantly in form and usage. Early inscriptions differ greatly from later ones in grammar, structure, and style. Scholars must first determine the approximate date and origin of a tablet before attempting translation. Without this step, Even correct readings can produce misleading interpretations. Given these difficulties, even highly trained specialists often spend entire careers mastering only a small portion of the known corpus. Each tablet requires comparison with lexical lists, parallel texts, and prior scholarship. This specialization limits how quickly the vast archive can be processed, leaving thousands of tablets untranslated or only partially understood for decades. Ultimately, cuneiform translation is not simply decoding symbols, but reconstructing meaning from fragmentary evidence. It requires combining linguistic expertise, historical context, careful interpretation. This complexity explains why progress has been so slow for so long, and why so much of early human history has remained hidden in clay. It also highlights why modern AI tools are now seen as potentially transformative in revealing patterns previously beyond human reach. Unlocking this knowledge could redefine what we know about human history and culture in ways never imagined before. Introducing AI to Sumerian translation. For centuries, translating Sumerian tablets was a painstaking, slow process, often likened to piecing together a vast jigsaw puzzle with many missing fragments. The complexity of cuneiform and scarcity of experts meant progress was measured in decades for just a few texts. But in 2023, a breakthrough emerged from combining ancient scholarship with cutting-edge technology. The Babylonian Engine project assembled a specialized AI language model trained exclusively on every known digitized cuneiform text. Unlike a general-purpose AI, this model was purpose-built for this singular task. Researchers fed it an unprecedentedly comprehensive dataset that included thousands of lexical lists, grammatical references, and over 150 years of scholarly translations. Crucially, it had simultaneous access to the entire corpus, mathematical texts, administrative records, religious writings, and more, allowing it to analyze patterns across the entire history and diversity of the language in ways a human mind could never manage. Human scholars developed their expertise gradually, building intuition through years of work with one text at a time. The AI, on the other hand, absorbed vast amounts of data simultaneously, enabling it to spot statistical relationships and contextual clues that had eluded humans. This meant it could begin deciphering damaged, fragmentary, or obscure texts that had resisted traditional translation efforts for decades or centuries. When applied to previously untranslated or only partially translated tablets, the AI's outputs stunned even the researchers. The readings were not only plausible, but often revealed surprising and complex insights into Sumerian knowledge and culture. Experts described the feeling almost as if they were encountering a familiar yet alien language, like recognizing a face in a photograph from a distant place and time previously inaccessible. This AI did not replace human expertise, but kind of complemented it, acting like a powerful lens to magnify and speed up the careful work of translation. In the end, tablets that once were dismissed as too fragmentary or obscure could be reconsidered and read again, which meant the long, silent voices of ancient scribes could finally be heard with a clearer sense of meaning. The impact was quick, almost immediate. The range of translated materials expanded fast, uncovering texts full of technical detail and nuance that had slipped by, unnoticed earlier. The AI basically found whole sequences that linked tablets scattered across different collections around the world, reconstructing larger works that had been thought lost or simply indecipherable. That new leap in translation ability promised more than just extra data. It also offered transformative reinterpretations of what those ancient texts really contained. What earlier seemed like separate fragments started to come together into something like coherent bodies of knowledge, and that, in turn, challenged earlier assumptions. Still, maybe the most important part is that scholars got a real chance to revisit Sumerian civilization with fresh eyes. And it starts, at least in this story, with the profound revelations tucked away inside their medical texts. As these ancient writings opened up, they revealed medical knowledge far more advanced than anyone had guessed. Medical knowledge beyond expectation. Among the first and most startling insights emerging from AI-assisted translations were those found in ancient Sumerian medical tablets held in collections such as the British Museum and the University of Pennsylvania. For decades, these tablets had been only partially translated, with large portions left ambiguous due to damage, fragmentary preservation, and the inherent difficulty of cuneiform interpretation. What scholars believed they contained was, at best, a glimpse into early healing practices. What the AI revealed instead was a far more complex and systematic medical tradition than previously imagined. Before this breakthrough, the dominant scholarly view held that Mesopotamian medicine was primarily a blend of ritual practice, incantations, and simple symptom-based observations. It was often framed as consistent with other Bronze Age healing systems, where illness was understood through a spiritual or supernatural lens rather than biological mechanisms. However, the AI analysis suggested that this interpretation was incomplete. Approximately 70% of the content previously thought to be lost or too obscure was shown instead to describe a structured diagnostic framework, organized in a surprisingly methodical way. This framework connected detailed physical observations to internal conditions and predicted outcomes. Symptoms such as variations in eye color, skin texture, temperature changes, urine characteristics, and localized pain were not recorded randomly. Instead, they were systematically grouped and interpreted as part of a broader diagnostic process. Specific combinations of signs were linked to particular illnesses, suggesting that Sumerian practitioners were engaged in an early form of clinical reasoning based on pattern recognition and comparative observation. One of the most remarkable examples comes from a series of tablets describing what modern medicine would likely identify as liver disease. The text does not rely on a single symptom or interpretation. Instead, it instructs the healer to observe multiple indicators over time and consider how they interact before arriving at a conclusion. Only after this layered assessment are treatments or prognoses suggested. This method closely resembles structured diagnostic reasoning, a practice that, in conventional medical history, is believed to have developed much later in ancient Greece and then fully matured many centuries afterward. While the diagnostic methods appear highly developed, the treatments themselves remain rooted in the cultural and scientific understanding of the period. Herbal remedies, dietary adjustments, and ritual incantations are frequently combined, reflecting a worldview in which physical and spiritual causes of illness were deeply intertwined. Although these practices lack modern concepts such as germ theory or sterile technique, the underlying observational rigor suggests a far more advanced empirical awareness than previously credited to this civilization. Even more striking was the AI's reinterpretation of tablets previously categorized under the vague term shaking disease. Earlier scholarship had broadly associated these texts with epilepsy due to limited translation clarity. However, the AI revealed that the term actually encompassed at least two distinct conditions, each with its own symptom patterns, progression, and responses to treatment. One condition appeared to involve sudden, episodic episodes, while the other followed a more gradual and persistent course. This distinction represents an early form of differential diagnosis, the ability to distinguish between diseases with similar outward symptoms, but different underlying causes and treatment needs. In modern medical history, such reasoning is typically attributed to developments in the 19th century CE. Yet here, evidence suggests that this analytical approach existed in some form more than 4,000 years ago, embedded within ancient Mesopotamian medical practice. The implications of this discovery extend far beyond a revision of medical timelines. They challenge the assumption that clinical reasoning evolved in a linear progression from superstition to science. Instead, they suggest that sophisticated observational medicine may have emerged early, only to be fragmented, lost, or overlooked in later historical transmission. Taken together, these findings open a new window into the intellectual world of Sumerian society. They reveal a culture engaged in careful observation, categorization, and systematic inquiry into the human body and disease. As additional tablets continue to be translated, it becomes increasingly likely that even more complex layers of medical understanding will emerge, further reshaping our perception of early human knowledge and its development across time. As this profound medical revelation settled in, mathematical and astronomical insights began to further expand the horizon of ancient Sumerian brilliance. Ancient astronomical insights. If the revelations in ancient medicine were subtle tremors, the AI's findings in astronomy sent shockwaves through the scholarly world. We already knew that Mesopotamian civilizations had sophisticated observational skills. Babylonian astronomers tracked planetary movements, predicted eclipses, and devised mathematical models of celestial mechanics that impressed even modern scholars. Yet the AI has pushed that timeline back by more than a millennium, uncovering surprising depth in early Sumerian astronomical knowledge that predates the classical Babylonian tradition. A collection of tablets long catalogued as agricultural records in the Berlin Museum became a focal point for this breakthrough. What had seemed to be routine scheduling turned out to house a complex system of numbers that defied agricultural explanation. When decoded using the Sumerian base 60 numeral system, these numbers detailed the precise positions of Jupiter, Saturn, and Venus against fixed stars, observed and recorded over multiple decades. This level of precision implies a sustained, organized system of astronomical observation that could only exist within an institution committed to preserving and passing down knowledge. It wasn't the work of a solitary observer, but a tradition maintained across generations with meticulous recording and comparison. The tablets date to approximately 2900 BCE, nearly 3,000 years before the astronomical revolution credited to figures like Copernicus, Kepler, and Galileo. What really stunted researchers was this weird little mathematical analysis showing that those observational records made more computational sense when you read them in a heliocentric frame, where the sun is basically the anchor point rather than the Earth. This proto-heliocentric setup wasn't some tidy philosophical position, it was more like a working mathematical canvas that was kind of previewing ideas we thought only showed up much later. Now, the idea that Sumerians might have had proto-heliocentric intuitions is, honestly, still deeply controversial. A number of mainstream scholars say those patterns can be accounted for inside a conventional geocentric model, but it takes complex, epicycle bookkeeping, and that means admitting a level of mathematical fluency we had not really credited to that early era. So either way, the consequences are huge. The Sumerians either had an early instinct for solar-centered computations, or they managed geocentric mathematics that was far sharper than we assumed. In both cases, we are pushed to revisit the standard chronology for how science supposedly unfolded. And this newly revealed knowledge doesn't just impress, it messes with the simple straight-line story of intellectual advancement. The starry sky that guided early humans was apparently read with a kind of depth and accuracy that mostly vanished from history, until now. The heavens, it seems, have been holding human ingenuity's secrets for a very long time. Just as astronomy rewrites our understanding of early science, AI's translations of Sumerian creation myths rewrite the story of belief and knowledge itself. Redefining creation. Myths. The Sumerian creation myths have been studied for over a century, playing a central role in shaping how historians and scholars understand early religious thought and mythology. Texts such as the Enuma Elish, the stories surrounding Enki, and various accounts of the Anunnaki have traditionally been interpreted as purely supernatural narratives. These stories, filled with powerful deities, cosmic struggles, and the origins of humanity, have long been seen as reflections of early human attempts to explain the world through myth and divine intervention. However, for much of that time, these interpretations were based on incomplete translations, limited by the painstaking pace of traditional scholarship. With the introduction of AI-assisted translation, a more complete and nuanced picture has begun to emerge. These newly expanded translations suggest that the beings described in these texts, the Anunnaki, may not have been viewed strictly as gods in the way modern readers understand the term. Instead, the language used to describe them often points to a class of individuals distinguished by their specialized knowledge and technical expertise. Words that have long been translated as divine or godly appear in contexts that emphasize mastery, skill, and control over complex processes rather than supernatural power. This reinterpretation shifts the meaning of these ancient narratives in a significant way. Rather than being purely religious myths, they begin to resemble social or even historical accounts of a structured society organized around knowledge and authority. The texts describe a world in which certain groups possessed advanced understanding, whether in agriculture, construction, medicine, or governance, and used that knowledge to maintain influence. Power, in this sense, was not simply inherited or mystical, but tied directly to expertise and the ability to manipulate systems others could not fully grasp. One of the most striking insights from these translations involves descriptions of human creation. In several passages, the language used closely mirrors terminology found in Sumerian texts related to craftsmanship and agriculture. Words associated with shaping materials, cultivating crops, and refining raw substances appear alongside descriptions of forming human beings. This suggests a conceptual framework in which humanity was constructed or developed through processes analogous to known practices, pointing toward an early form of thinking that resembles proto-biotechnological ideas. It is important, however, to approach these findings with caution. While some interpretations have ventured into more sensational territory, suggesting advanced technologies or even extraterrestrial involvement, the actual evidence presented by the AI translations is more grounded. What these texts reveal is not necessarily proof of lost high technology, but rather a sophisticated way of thinking about creation, knowledge, and transformation within the cultural context of the time. At the same time, these reinterpretations raise difficult and intriguing questions. If the earliest Sumerian texts describe a pre-existing class of highly skilled individuals whose knowledge helped shape civilization, then where did that knowledge originate? Archaeology has yet to provide clear answers, leaving a gap between what the texts describe and what physical evidence can confirm. This gap highlights how much of human history may still remain hidden or misunderstood. The realization that only a portion of these texts had been accurately understood, perhaps as little as 30%, adds further weight to these questions. The remaining untranslated or previously misinterpreted material may hold additional insights that could challenge long-standing assumptions about early societies and their intellectual capabilities. Ultimately, these discoveries are not just about reinterpreting myths. They force a broader reconsideration of how knowledge, authority, and civilization itself developed. The Sumerian stories, once viewed primarily as symbolic or religious, now appear to contain layers of meaning that reflect real systems of thought and organization. In this light, they become more than myths. They become windows into a complex and intellectually rich world, offering a deeper and more human understanding of our earliest origins. The new light cast by AI on these ancient narratives also brings reactions, debates, and challenges from within the scholarly community, illuminating the struggles of any discipline confronting its own deep-seated assumptions, implications, and scholarly responses. The new translations unlocked by AI have sent shockwaves through academia, forcing scholars to confront a massive and uncomfortable truth. Our entire understanding of early civilization rests on a partial and incomplete foundation. Tens of thousands of tablets remain untranslated, some damaged or fragmented, others written in complex or technical language. This means that what we have long accepted as the timeline of law, medicine, astronomy, and religion may be built on a fraction of the available evidence. Many experts have embraced the AI's findings with cautious optimism. Leading Assyriologists recognize that these machine-generated translations offer genuinely new insights, sometimes unveiling philologically sound readings that challenge previous interpretations. Their engagement represents the healthy response of a discipline willing to revise itself in light of new evidence. Yet, even within this openness, questions and debates abound, especially regarding the limits of AI in replicating the nuanced contextual judgments of human scholars. However, a vocal minority within the field has responded defensively, treating these AI-driven revelations more as threats than as opportunities. Some scholars argue that while AI can produce plausible translations, it lacks the deep, immersive understanding developed over decades of study. They warn against sensationalizing machine-generated results and caution that some outputs may sound convincing but fall short of true linguistic competence. These critiques underscore the complexity of blending human expertise with artificial intelligence. What underlies much of this resistance is the unavoidable admission that the unprocessed tablet corpus is immense and that it has dramatically outpaced human capacity. Admitting this means acknowledging gaps in the fundamental framework that has shaped public and academic narratives for over 150 years. Many researchers find this realization unsettling because it challenges long-held assumptions about the origins of key intellectual advances. The reluctance to accept this incomplete picture has, in some cases, led to gatekeeping behaviors, where partial translations have shaped entire interpretive frameworks that now seem fragile. Yet, the evidence shows that those early translations represented only the easiest texts to understand: administrative records, simple narratives, and better preserved tablets. The complex, technical, and damaged texts, likely containing the most sophisticated knowledge, remained beyond reach until AI intervention. If Sumerian medical frameworks were actually so advanced, like way ahead of Hippocratic medicine by centuries, and if their astronomical calculations seem to nudge at proto-heliocentric models, then the origins and the development of human knowledge are due for a pretty major revision. The creation texts, when you reframe them as reflections on knowledge hierarchies rather than outright supernatural myths, add this odd but real extra layer to how we picture ancient societies' social and intellectual structures. And honestly, this upheaval is bigger than academic squabbling. It shifts how we see ourselves and also our ancestors. When you start admitting that people from 4,000 to 5,000 years ago had deeper know-how and more complex societies than we ever credited, you have to rethink the usual stories about progress and enlightenment. The tale of civilization's rise becomes more textured and less straight line than we were taught. AI has turned into the instrument that finally pays attention to the whispers, those long buried inside clay, and it's starting to bring back voices we didn't even realize we were missing. It creates the possibility to revise human history with a kind of clarity and depth that used to be unattainable, and it could open doors to discoveries that might reshape many fields of knowledge. Right now, the scholarly community is standing at a crossroads, either to take on this expanded understanding with humility and curiosity, or to retreat into stories that feel familiar but limited. How that balance is set will determine what kind of story we tell about our shared past for years and years to come. For centuries, Sumerian tablets were mysteries locked away, their secrets nearly inaccessible. Now, AI is decoding these ancient texts, revealing a civilization far more advanced than history taught us, from early medicine to astronomy and profound mythologies. This discovery challenges everything we thought we knew about human beginnings. If you found this eye-opening, please like and subscribe to uncover more stories that reshape our understanding of the past.